and talk data, and following that we're going to do through our commodities. We're going to have a look at gold, Bitcoin or crypto, and oil. But first of all, Ash, how's the seasonals looking at the moment?
Well, I think if we have a quick look through the seasonals, the major currency seasonals, and get a general feel of which currency tends to do the best at this particular time of year. The Aussie looks to me like it gets a pretty good rally throughout most of October, but then it starts to dip towards the end. We might be getting like relatively near that to that particular point now. And then it gets a little bit choppy. And really what I'd like to see, if I'm looking at seasonals, I'd really like to see a period more like this, where you see a low form at a certain time of the year, and then you see in the same run the high, rather than kind of looking at this where it kind of gets a little bit sticky. According to this, it would suggest that really the top in the Australian dollar is sometime in November, but you might kind of have to live through a little bit of choppy price action towards the end of October. So we could still be holding on to the Australian dollar. That looks pretty good. The COT data that we've seen relatively recently has been pretty bullish on the Australian dollar. Looking at the pound, I quite like this. The pound does actually extend right the way through, and this stops in December, but then we'd go into here and we'd see it rally right the way up until February. So, I'd be relatively supportive of what Lexi is saying. We did see a pretty good boost with the pound towards the end of last week, and I think that was on some interest rate speculation. It's still got a long way to go. Interest rates are currently at 0.1%, and I think that they're effectively, speculators are looking for the United Kingdom to possibly even raise interest rates before the United States. I think the fact that they are in the conversation is enough for us to say, looking for shorts in the pound and the dollar with an extended move, maybe not the best and safest way to play it. Whether we actually bet on the fact that they are going to raise interest rates is another question. But I think we can probably put it in the back pocket and say, okay, we probably don't need to be too bearish on the pound and the dollar in the coming weeks. But what we could look to be bearish on is the yen. I would say there's pretty much no chance. You can never say never, if you like, when you're looking at currencies or when you're looking at trading. But I'd say the chances are incredibly slim that the yen are going to go anywhere near interest rate hikes or even monetary tightening. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for the Japanese economy to do that. And this is the kind of seasonality pattern that we really like to see. So the yen, sometime around October, mid-October, we see a big dip and very few pullbacks really, right the way through to that around about the middle of December. So November looks like an incredibly bearish month. Turn in October, maybe another turn to the upside in December, but looks like we're heading for a pretty good period here for the yen. And as I say, that would be backed up with some of the fundamental data as well, if we're going on the bet of who's likely to change interest rates first. And we are in that particular period. Sometimes you look at the data and it's more to do with who's got the best purchasing power with the current financial conditions. But we're sort of in a different era now, because we are now talking about some countries tightening, some countries possibly even talking about interest rate hikes going into next year. What do the other countries do when some of the majors start to change their policy? Do they stand still, or do they try and keep up? So the yen looks like a pretty good signal seasonally for some downside. And the other one I'd probably like to bring our attention to is the euro, but I'm not sure. Oh, well, let's look at the dollar index, because the euro is made up of most of the dollar index. The dollar index is mostly made up and calculated from the euro. So when we look at the dollar index, again, pretty good run to the upside on the dollar throughout around about the middle of October, right the way through to the middle of November. So looks like, and you know, back to the fundamentals, Europe very similar to Japan. The likelihood that they are going to move and be one of the first movers, I would suggest, is pretty slim. So, so bringing those factors into play, you look at the US dollar on the seasonals with a probability that we might see some tightening. Looks pretty good for upside, suggesting euro downside. You look at the yen from what we've just seen from the seasonals, very, very weak, and the weakest signal of all, moving to the downside, and you know, bringing that monetary policy back into the argument and the discussion suggests that they're probably unlikely to move as well. So looks like dollar looks pretty good for some upside. Yen looks pretty good for some downside, along with the euro and some of the other markets. You know, I certainly wouldn't go against the pound right now.
Cheers, Ash. Thanks for that. Much appreciated. Another look at the data, the seasonal chart. So it does look to me as if most things are doing something seasonally over the next 6 to 8 weeks. It's a nice period for seasonals where not much is going sideways. There's some action on most of them. Yeah,
I think so, mate. And because we are in that discussion phase of monetary policy, you know, it's not quiet anymore, is it? We've had the boom. We are starting to see the result of some of the price points and some of the supply chain issues. We know all about that stuff. Europe is still, Lagarde is still calling for inflation to be transitory. That's not bullish discuss. That's not bullish language. You know, that's she's basically saying, oh yeah, we're okay. We can do nothing here. So that, you know, the seasonals look like they might actually start to play out.
Mate, Muth is asking a quick look at the seasonals on the Kiwi. Do you have the seasonals on the Kiwi?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, no, we have also seen New Zealand move. Looks a little bit choppy. You know, it looks pretty wild actually. Generally speaking, up. You know, if you're looking at the general direction, it looks up. But it looks wild, and if you were just saying, you know, let's just focus on the seasonals, you would you'd want to be pretty accurate with your entries in accordance to this particular chart here. But generally speaking, yes, up, but not as smooth as what we tend to see in May. You know, this seems like a pretty wild period coming up.
Nice, mate. Yeah, that major line movement in New Zealand dollars, ripper. Cheers, Ash. Thank you very much for that. We'll see you again next Sunday. If anyone else wants to have any information on COT or seasonals, they're able to join the Market Edge broadcast group and just contact the company if they want to do that and have daily updates.